Yes, Geordies, welcome to your very first match preview as Aston Villa and Newcastle United drew 0-0. Do you know what? I'm quite happy. If you would ask me before the game, would you take a point at Villa Park tomorrow? I would have been like, you know what? Probably. But flipping that around, I'm a little bit frustrated because I generally think we were the better team with and against the ball. So the very first thing I want to say, I hope everyone's well. The second thing I want to say, I hope everybody enjoyed that game. The third thing I want to say is, are you all starting to get a little bit optimistic like me now? Because I have consistently been positive going in this summer, going in this season. And I think that game today proved that we're more than just a one-man team. I keep on saying this. Our starting 11 is good enough to compete with anyone. And today proved that. We'll competed well. We'll win individual battles. We opened up Villa from all areas, down the right, down the left, both giving us a lot of success. Was it the best game of football? Probably not. There's no goals to break down, which I'm incredibly gutted about, but I knew the morale wouldn't be low. The lads seemed like they had a point to prove today. So when you take a step back and all things considered, missing our star striker, who scored 23 league goals for us last season, all the negativity from the media, pundits, and football fans in general surrounding Newcastle United, our abysmal record at Villa Park, I'm actually really happy with it. I know it's a little bit frustrating because we should have put away at least one chance, but if you can't win the game, make sure you don't lose a game. And we completely nullified any threat from Aston Villa today. Aston Villa away is traditionally a difficult game for Newcastle United. Thought today we went toe-to-toe with Villa, showed them little to no respect, and the way I categorise our performance is it was a professional performance. Before we break down some of the good and bad from the first half, second half, let's have a look at some statistics. If you go to Villa Park and you're keeping Aston Villa to a 0.13 XG, I don't care what you say, that's a good performance. The first thing you want to do is shut down their threat. That's exactly what Newcastle United did today, especially in that first half. Now, on the flip side of that, we had 16 shots, no goals. We just lacked that prolific clinical edge in that final third. But the game played out exactly how I thought. Newcastle United using the width, that's where most of our attacks come from. Aston Villa trying to attack through those central areas. That is exactly what I said in my match review. So I'm sorry, guys, there's no goals to break down, and I'm generally gutted about it. So these episodes will probably get better as the season goes on. And I also went to buy Newcastle top today, but JD has them in without the Champions League badge. If I'm going to buy one, it's got to be with a Champions League badge. Anyways, that's my problem, not yours. So what did I like about the first half? Well, I think we started the game exceptionally well. We're dangerous on the counter-attack. We'll move the ball quickly, positive, and we're really direct. No team likes to come up against a direct team. And then defensively, we defended as a unit. Now, there's something I often say in football. There's a way of controlling games without the ball. Even though Newcastle United had majority of possession, we were excellent out of possession. We controlled what Villa did with the ball. As soon as you start doing that, you can win any game of football. That is something I spoke about last season a lot in my match previews. Learning to control the game without the ball, being so good against the ball. So if a team wants to dominate possession, you can allow it. You're comfortable, you're happy, and that's exactly what it looked like when Newcastle United. There's a phrase I often use: get used to being comfortable in uncomfortable situations. Newcastle looked so comfortable against the ball when Villa had the ball. Villa looked shocked. I was generally impressed with Newcastle United's discipline, resilience, competitiveness, structure, pressing triggers. It was absolutely outstanding from Newcastle United against the ball. I thought it was fascinating how it changed with defensive structure depending on where Villa were with the ball. So if they were in their own defensive third, we were aggressively pressing in a 4-4-2. Now, once that ball reached the middle third, that's when we reverted to a 4-5-1. Super smart from Eddie Howe this, because you're doing two things there. You either turn over the ball high up the pitch, which gives you a better opportunity of scoring, but you're also taking away exactly what Aston Villa wanted to do, and that's play through the lines. So as soon as they reach that middle third, because we were compact in a 5 midfield and leaving no space or passing lanes for Aston Villa to play through, it really upset their rhythm. So by doing this, we pretty much prevented Aston Villa creating that box shape in midfield, which I spoke about in my review. And then because Anthony Elanga was such a threat on the right-hand side, this forced Aston Villa to stay wide. And I said in my review, get Aston Villa worried about what you're doing rather about what they're going to do. Because we went with 5-man midfield, that allowed us to create width, but as well be compact. So it got Morgan Rogers thinking, I can't move in the middle and leave Anthony Elanga one-on-one. Because let's be honest, Anthony Elanga was having Lucas Digne out for toast. So I just think the way we looked at Aston Villa's weaknesses and nullified their threat allowed us to be expressive, dangerous on the counter-attack. And we've seen it in the opening 5 minutes. Anthony Elanga getting through on goal. Okay, Anthony Elanga should have scored. I kind of feel like 4 or 5 games into the season, he probably took that away. But we'll talk about our opening chances very shortly, because I want to show you what I mean about our press, because when Aston Villa were in their half or deep in their penalty box, this was our press. Look at it. It's aggressive. It's man-to-man. You've got Bruno going in on Onana. You've got Anthony Gordon closing in the goalkeeper, but also splitting them so that he hasn't got a pass option to the centre-back. You've got Elanga going tightly on Tyrone Mings. You've got Barnes ready to pounce on Mighty Cash. You've got Joe Linton going with Kamara. So it was an aggressive man-to-man press, which forced Aston Villa into a negative pass. And this is what I was speaking about, controlling games out of possession. And then if we move it on, if Aston Villa managed to beat through that press, this is what will look like. And it was a 4-5-1 shape. And what this did was pretty much not allowed Aston Villa to play through the lines. So they were forced into a negative pass. What's a negative pass? Either a backwards pass or a pass that doesn't affect the team, not a progressive pass. So it won't really be dangerous to Newcastle United. This is what I was talking about, allowing the team to have the ball. You don't need to win the ball at every single moment. You can be comfortable just shadow playing. And Newcastle United did this absolutely brilliantly. And I just want to show you what I mean about Morgan Rogers, because he was not coming inside at all in that first half, which allowed Aston Villa not to create that box shape, which meant we were going into a 3-man press in midfield, and it was literally man for man. So they didn't have that overload in midfield. And the reason being is because Anthony Elanga was creating width. So Morgan Rogers had a choice to make. Either I go with Anthony Elanga and don't let him create a one-on-one situation, or I let him leave and be dangerous. Because Anthony Elanga was getting some success, it made him rethink his position. So that completely offset what Aston Villa wanted to do. I can't lie, it was brilliant from Eddie Howe. So it was a hectic opening 5 minutes, but in a positive way for Newcastle United. Anthony Elanga should have scored that opportunity. I don't mind him having a strike. Like I said before, 3 or 4 games into the season, he probably took that opportunity away. Now, what I didn't like was his boss. Now, what I didn't like about the strike was his body shape. It was too easy to read. He did nothing to disguise his effort. His body shape made it easy for the goalkeeper to read. But I don't mind him taking a strike. But again, that's something Eddie Howe would have to look to improve in the future. Just that little bit of composure in front of goal. Picking your shot selections a lot better. But in regards to the first half, I thought every man did the basics extremely well. And I think the first thing when you step onto the football field is to do your basics. I always say, like, if I'm going onto a football field, my direct opponent, I want to win my individual battle. Once you win your individual battle, you've already got an advantage, and then you work better as a team. I think the front three were lively. They just lacked the end product. We're winning the midfield. Joe Linton grew into the game. I don't think he had his best game. The back four was solid, aggressive, attacking every ball. Aston Villa just couldn't cope with our press and our directness when we had the ball. Now, a couple of things I also liked about our first half is we were getting bodies in the box. You see Gordon in there. You see Bruno in there. You see Tonali, Joe Linton just on the edge there. You see Anthony Elanga in the box. Anthony Elanga had a little snapshot here. Look, if he connects, it's one of those that pings in the top corner, but they only happen 1 out of 10 opportunities. But I liked how we're getting bodies in the box. And even Anthony Gordon's header, maybe he should take that hairband off. But look, we're getting bodies in the box. And this is what I wanted to see more of Newcastle United last season. Look where they are. Exactly where I said I want to see more bodies in and around the 6-yard box. Alexander Isak was brilliant at getting in the 6-yard box. Without his presence, I was worried about us attacking that box. But it's obviously something Eddie Howe was looked upon and give instructions to Anthony Elanga, Bruno, and Anthony Gordon to get in that box. So we were opening up Aston Villa. We just couldn't find that cutting edge. Okay, there weren't clear-cut chances, and the only clear-cut chance was probably Anthony Elanga's one-on-one, but the signs were there that we were opening up Aston Villa. Now, you can probably sit there and say, well, Aston Villa had an off day, so it was easy for Newcastle United. I see it differently. I think Aston Villa was sloppy, and I was surprised by them because I generally like watching Aston Villa, and I just think they couldn't get into their rhythm. But the reason they couldn't get into their rhythm is because Newcastle United didn't let them get into the rhythm. Newcastle United had a prolific striker today, they would have won that game. Now, I was generally surprised by Aston Villa's performance. I just think even if things aren't going right for you, you're a little bit more energetic, a little bit more aggressive, but they lack that oomph today. Kind of like Newcastle in the first 20 minutes of the second half, lacking that oomph, but they got it back once Anthony Gordon went out wide, in my opinion. But going into that half time, my only concern was you have to take your chances while you're on top because Villa won't get any worse. And when we come out in that second half, Aston Villa grew into the game. And let's not deny it, Aston Villa looked a little bit better in that first 20 minutes of that second half. And the reason being is because Morgan Rogers started coming inside. And I've got a funny feeling Unai Emery gave him a bollocking at half time and said, let's get you inside. Let's start creating that pattern of play and let's play through the lines. And that's exactly what they did. First of all, they started switching. So Ollie Watkins would go out on the left, Morgan Rogers would come inside, and that was instantly just causing us a little bit of problems because they were misjointing our back four. When they were static, they were a lot easier to defend against. Now, remember what I was talking about, that box shape? They started doing it in the second half. It was clear. If you look at the time on the clock, you can see that box shape. You can see Morgan Rogers coming inside, and they've created that box shape because that box shape creates a 4 against 3 in the middle of the pitch. When Morgan Rogers was staying wide in the first half, it was 3 against 3, and we were winning that 3 battle. And even if we move it on to a different clip, you can see again Villa are in possession and they've got that box shape. You've got Onana, Kamara, Tillemans and Morgan Rogers. So once he created that box shape, it gives us a choice to make. Either Kieran Trippier would move inside, but that leaves Lucas Digne out wide, and it takes away our attacking threat because our right winger would have to go back with him, or a centre-back goes and marks him, but that means both centre-backs are marking at the same time. Ideally, you only want one of them marking, but it just meant they had an extra option to pass through our midfield, and they certainly did that. If you think back to Aston Villa's opportunities, they had one real opportunity, and that was Ollie Watkins. Where did that opportunity come from? The box shape. And here's what I mean. So I'm going to circle all 4 players in the box shape, and they all played their part in this. Onana picked up the ball, played it at Tillemans, who then played it at Kamara, who then played it at Morgan Rogers, who then took a touch inside and then played it at Ollie Watkins. Ollie Watkins moved it onto his left foot, had a strike straight at Nick Pope. That was the one time Aston Villa really broke through our press, and they did it by creating that box shape. So the fact that we nullified that box shape for, I would say, 88 minutes of the game was just so impressive. So I generally feel Newcastle United caught Aston Villa off guard by their defensive shape and then using the width to be direct. And when they got the ball, they were really direct, and it caused Aston Villa some problems. Look, we didn't open them up continuously, and there was hiccups along the game. But look, you're playing in the Premier League. Not every game you're going to be dominant in. There's going to be moments in games where you are against the ball. And Newcastle United had a couple of moments in that second half where they were against the ball. And then obviously the sending off come. But where did that sending off come? From broken play. We picked up a loose ball and then we attacked dangerously. The movement from Anthony Gordon today was really impressive. Timed his runs well. Played on the last man. He was causing problems. He was running the channels. The only problem with Anthony Gordon, he's not prolific. You can't go into a Premier League season where your striker being Anthony Gordon because he's not going to hit those numbers that you really want. And another thing I want to touch upon is Fabian Shaw, because I thought he was my man of the match today. I just thought he ate up everything. He gave Ollie Watkins nothing. But what that shows is the importance of quality squad depth, because he now knows Malik Chow is ready just to step in. So he knows every single performance he has to step up. Every time he walks on that football pitch, he needs to give his 100%. Because if he doesn't, Malik Chow's ready to step in and take his place. So this does a couple of things. It obviously, those aging players don't get complacent, inject them with a new lease of life, but it also makes players train harder. And once one player trains harder, it rubs off on everybody else, and that lifts the standards at the club. So once we get more of this all over the squad, it's just going to benefit the club all round. So there's a couple of players I want to talk about, and the first one's Fabian Shaw. Seemed like he had a point to prove today. Didn't give Ollie Watkins a sniff. He was aggressive. He was winning these aerial duels. He was winning these ground duels. What I was most impressed with is his and Dan Burns' positional play today. They were positionally excellent. Then I think the best midfielder on the pitch was Sandro Tonali. What a player he is. The caliber of this player is insane. He's a jack of all trades. He's press resistant. He's an insane runner. He's an elite duel winner. He literally has everything. And lastly, I want to touch upon Anthony Gordon and Anthony Elanga. Anthony Gordon, why? Because look, we all know he's not a natural finisher. I'm not saying that. He's not a natural striker, and I've said that for a while, but he led the line brilliantly today. After all the noise surrounding Alexander Isak, he led the line brilliantly. His movement caused problems. He was a willing runner. His link-up play was nice at times. He connected with these wide men really well at times. And then I want to touch upon Anthony Elanga. What I do think he needs to add is a little bit more composure in his game, whether that be with the ball or when he's through on goal. But Newcastle United are built for his profile. Frightening speed, dangerous on the counter-attack, and a willing runner. Once he builds up those partnerships on the pitch, he can be electric. But I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's used to playing with a traditional number 9, like somebody like Chris Wood. So he would have had to adapt his game slightly today. Usually he goes on the outside, puts in crosses per 90. But with somebody like Anthony Gordon in the box, it's kind of pointless. But in truth, guys, I'm happy with the point. I know it's frustrating because we had the higher XG, we had more possession, we looked more dominant, we nullified what Aston Villa did, but I'm happy with the point. Away to Aston Villa on the opening day of the season, which is traditionally a very tough game for Newcastle United, especially with all the negativity from the media and all this noise surrounding Alexander Isak, not going in with a traditional number 9. I'm actually quite happy with the point. Now, there is some lessons to learn. We do need to sign a striker before the window shuts, and I do believe we will. I do believe we might even sign 2. But look, guys, there's your first match review. And I want to know your thoughts. Like, I want you to be honest. Did you enjoy this episode? Would you like us to do it slightly differently? I kind of feel like when there's goals in a game, it's going to get better. When it's a 0-0 draw, it's quite difficult to do match review and look at how things went out on the pitch. But look, let me know your opinions. Are you happy with the result despite us having the better chances, or are you frustrated that we didn't get the win? But you know what, guys, this has got me excited for Liverpool at home. But make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on your way out. Look, 0-0, probably fair results. I don't think Newcastle did enough to win the game. And before I leave, I just want to wish Aston Villa all the best for the rest of the season. Thank you very much for watching. One last thing to say: away the lads.